Evening.
Evening. How we doing?
Good. Just got back from a friend's place where I outsourced some sanity, as we do by conversation with other similar social primates of the same species.
I wish you had that title. That'd be a great title for the show. Our Source Sanity. That's such a good title. I'm gonna coin it right now. That's title for the episode.
Okay, we'll see how if we come up with another
Well,
title by the end.
unless we go particularly hard into the topic that's on either of our minds, in which case the title should need to be something like that. But God, I love that. Our Source Sanity.
Yeah, well, what's on my mind to go deep and dark off the bat. On my way home, I heard a radio news article about oh, a child who his mum had got him to call 911 because she was afraid that a large man in the house was going to get violent. The child had called the police had shown up, and I don't know any of what happened in the intervening time, but the child ended up getting shot in the chest by the police, and as he lay in his mother's arms, he asked her what he had done wrong.
Was this in our country?
No, America.
Why was it on the radio?
Because reporting on stuff that happens that will get views
Mm,
and clicks and so on, but the
if it leads, it
thought,
leads.
yeah, it does. The thought that came out of that, beyond the metaphysical why is there pain and tragedy questions, was what does it mean to be strong as an individual and able
Hmm.
to face adversity and pain in your life, and what does that mean? Because it's not just stoically having no emotions.
Okay. That seems very on topic for our conversations in general. That seems to be a theme we've been rolling with lately, but I don't see how that connects. Is this you as imagining yourself as the parent? Is that how it connects?
Yeah, well, having a 5-year-old son is like
Mm.
the it struck a chord of that what did I do wrong? That tragedy of innocence, the tragic destruction of and the occurrence of
And
tragedy in
reality
life.
requires, yeah,
Yeah.
reality requires the sacrifice of innocence. Did I do wrong?
It's the fact that tragedy occurs in
Mm.
life, and sometimes the tragedy is of such unbelievable magnitude that it
I'm a little stumped by this question.
well, I'm not even
Um,
sure what the question is at this point. It's something that was on my
well,
mind.
I know what the question is. But it's as far as I'm concerned, the biggest question of humanity that you've just sort of dumped on me. How do I even answer? No, this is the why does suffering exist?
Well, I'm sort of leaving the why
Which
because
is
that gets very metaphysical and theological, but
right.
it's the suffering exists. How
How do you
suffering,
deal with it?
yeah, suffering exists, and we know that it will occur to us at some point. Our
Mm.
someone close to us will die, certainly. Someone, or if you have no one close to you, that's its own tragedy. Or they'll have an illness, or you'll end up in hospital, or something. Tragic things will occur to us if they haven't already, and if we're not already in the middle of it. And I think neither of us are in the middle of tragedy at the moment, but like the be the strongest man at your father's funeral type thing. It's okay, what does that mean? And what is it that what is the goal here? Because it's not just stoic unfeelingness. There's something
No,
different.
and that's not possible as far as I'm concerned.
All you do is
Whoever
repress
so
it.
presumes that, yeah, whoever so acts as if they are like that is just masking, or they're 100% sociopathic, which is not an ideal to be held. Um, Suffering exists. The pointless torture of innocence exists.
The point of what? Say that last bit
The pointless
again.
torture
Ah.
of innocence
Mm.
exists. And we can muse all day and long about why that is, and people of theological bent love to have many excuses for such things, but as far as I'm concerned, mm, sorry, mild distraction. Um, it okay, it exists, and the problem here stems from the fact that we all agree it's wrong, right? There's
Yes.
suffering in the world. That sucks, and it hurts us, and it hurts those we care about, particularly innocents. We're setting aside the question of why because that's a metaphysical question that
Mm.
is just boils down to a matter of interpretation of reality that's not helpful either. The thing is practical. What do you do about that?
Mm.
And as far as I'm concerned, the only thing you can do about that, given the presumption that suffering is wrong, is reduce it. You don't get to control the world. You don't get to control the accidents of fate or the evil actions of others. All you can do is react. So if a thing goes wrong and horrific circumstances arrive that create suffering or the suffering of innocence, all you have is reduce it. You know, if you're the victim of said suffering, or say your child is or something, all you can do is not make it worse. Because many people will rage at existence and go, "This is unfair. How could this be?" And they'll rage and they'll be violent and they'll make everything worse,
And seek revenge for the suffering that they've experienced.
which does not but make more suffering or inflict it on someone else to make themselves feel more justified or powerful again, which is really what's going on with revenge. I
And
was weak, therefore I will feel strong by making you be the victim.
there is certainly a appeal and a logic to that argument which would be irresponsible to ignore the existence of.
Yeah, I think the only answer in a situation like that is to go, okay, this is wrong, and I'm mad that it's wrong. But if I make things worse, whether it's for others or not, then I might as well have done it in the first place. You can't at the same time say the suffering of innocence is wrong and then go out and cause suffering because you're angry at reality for suffering's existence.
Mm.
Your only choice is to bear it because otherwise there's more suffering. And while it's really easy to be mad at reality for these things existing, it's
I guess the
I wish there was more profound answer than that, but I don't
mm.
think there is.
I guess the bit that for me, I think we've both been I think we've both been in positions where the pain of that present moment was crushing and more than we could stand up against and say we could withstand. And I.
If that's the case, how are you here?
So, what does it mean to withstand? Does it mean to merely survive through, or does it mean to push back against and do something positive with it?
I think if your standard for someone dealing with suffering is them acting in the best possible manner and transcending that suffering. You're holding your average person to, or yourself, to too high of a standard.
Well, that's not exactly new for me, so that's probably likely in terms of
Yeah, like
myself.
when things go wrong in your life, having your base minimum standard as doing the best possible thing in every scenario is crushing. Um, in saying that, I'm not exactly separate from you in that I do my best at that as well. But the thought calls to mind that if you couldn't withstand it, you wouldn't still be talking. As far as I'm concerned, that's what not withstanding it means.
Hmm.
Now, perhaps you didn't do it optimally, but who can claim that they did, regardless of how hard they try?
I guess that continuing to exist through whatever it is without making it worse. Like nothing is better than bad in the sense that zero is better than negative. Zero is better than negative anything. And if you
Mm,
can not make it worse, even if you can't do anything to make it better, improve the situation for the future, make it less bad for anyone else. Although in a lot of cases, it's like doing nothing could be the thing that still makes it worse for others because of other forces that aren't yours.
yeah,
But then
and
that's
that's why you
trying
got
to.
to think hard.
Mm,
But I think you're right. At bare minimum, you should not actively seek to make things worse. Now, I think everyone's going to do it by accident, but this is a dark subject to be on your mind tonight.
oh, I think the darkness is never far away, and it's not a case
Mm,
of losing the darkness. It's a case of gaining balancing light. And I feel like I've got a lot of that at the moment. I've got a fulfilling job. I've got a happy son. I've got fulfillment of providing stability and yeah, but the darkness.
it all seems very personal. I mean, less about effect on those around you and the social or the what net suffering of humanity. Those things seem more of a statement of things that make me feel good about myself so I can cope about the horror of my existence. They don't seem to match with the topic that you're talking about, which is more suffering in the world and how it affects others and how my actions might or your actions might counteract that.
I think the image of if I was the parent from that news report on the radio cradling their child as they died and asked what they did wrong, that made it very personal in the image I got in my head. And the the question that came out of that was then worth asking was personal tragedy because we can well things that don't affect us. Only things that affect our person ourselves affect us, but we can personalize the tragedy of existence of the world, but it's still affecting ourselves rather
I
than like empathy
I
with the
think in the
world.
moment,
Mm.
in the moment, unless you are the type, I think your reaction in such a moment is only ever going to be what your nature inclines you to react as. I think afterwards, the thought and the structure you built within yourself will take action and take form. But in that moment, I don't think that you could influence your actions. Does that make sense?
Because I guess uh, I was wanting to find sort of a way to prepare for the inevitable tragedies to come. Like you can,
For your son.
if you know you're going to lift a heavy weight, you can go train your muscles. It's like if you know you're going to be crushed by tragedy at some point, how can you prepare to handle that least terribly? I was I was tempted to say optimally, but it's like you're not going to. But
I I don't know if that's even a goal you want to achieve.
hmm, do you lose something in moving towards the ability to do
Yeah,
that?
yes. I think that the person who would respond in the most appropriate manner in that situation is one who doesn't feel, and you sacrifice plenty to be that person. I say that because I fear if I was in such a situation, I wouldn't feel anything, and I would be the person who would react based entirely on what I think is best in terms of God comforting the child in their last moments, not based on my emotions. Because I have spent my life preparing for tragedy and suffering, as I believed that was all my life would be. And in the process of preparing for the tragedy and suffering of life, I no longer feel anything. Um, mm,
Feel like
that's too final of a statement.
mm,
Okay. Sometimes I do, but there's nuances there, and I think if I was to go into the nuances, it would distract from the subject.
mm,
But I think the point is worth saying that the person who is ultimately prepared to face the ultimate suffering and deal with it in the most appropriate way would lose a large percentage of their humanity. Because a lot of our humanity is based in our emotional reactions to suffering and the care we have for others. But if you're able to handle it, then maybe you don't have that much care for others.
mm. It's the reaction that my thought process goes to and the way you play out scenarios in your head. The reaction I see in a played out scenario in my head is just sort of overwhelmed blankness in the sense of like a microphone that's trying to record a noise that's beyond its ability to. It's just like
I get it.
every needle gets pegged to the far end of the scale and just stops. And then everything just sort of freezes in shock, and then later something. Then it's just sort of
Yeah.
the scenario ends.
I think this trigger in you is related to the question of sacrificing the children to the world, the Mother Mary problem. Um, and your specific example is a way to try and concretize that. But I don't think that you can make it a single example in which you can interact. This is the problem of every parent, particularly as mothers, is that if you want your children to grow up and be independent, they will be damaged and scarred and eventually killed by the world, and you can't protect them. I have a feeling that that's what's going on here, more than, say, this
Mm.
specific hypothetical.
Yeah, like the idea of if my son was killed in some tragic accident, like from running out onto the road, like if I take every action and precaution to prevent him ever running out onto the road in a dangerous way, then that that would leave its own scars and its own
Mm,
issues. Like having a
sounds rather stifling. Yeah.
yeah, having a parent who's terrified for your safety all the time.
I think that's a difficult thing for your position because I imagine that there is some biological reasons that you would have both maternal and paternal reactions to your child, and you're trying to walk the line between them, being an
Yeah.
only parent. And I'm not sure how that I'm not sure how the details of that works out, but this seems to heavily remind me of the good mother must fail issue. Being too protective is catastrophic and stifling
Mm.
and choking, claustrophobic. There's a
Because
certain sense of you will be damaged, pick yourself up again attitude. And with me and my wife, it's something we're able to negotiate. If she's being too protective, I can lean in and go, that's too much protection. And if I'm being too pushy to do something dangerous, she can go, hey, that's a bit much. You're scaring them.
mm.
And that we have that balance then into play where we can negotiate. But you're stuck trying to have an answer on your own.
Because I guess for you, you each focus on one half of the equation, knowing that you're by having your clearer sight of that side, you're losing clear sight on the other side to a degree, but
Yes,
relying on
and
the
we have
other
to
to,
trust each other.
yeah,
Yeah, we have to trust each other to be able to have that negotiation.
and not just expect each other to see the same perspective all the time.
Mm. I
Mm.
think if you're concerned about the balance of interplay and getting it right, all I can say is that you won't get it right. Try as you might. You'll make mistakes. You'll err one way or the other. Mm, You know, you're not going to be able to be everything to your child on your own.
And the the reply that comes to mind is, well, then I'd better hurry up and find a wife. And oh, yeah, yeah, that's easier
I
said
don't
than done.
feel that you particularly want to go back into that conversation today.
Yep, fair enough.
I mean, I'm willing always, but I don't think that you're in the state for that, just off a hunch.
Yeah. Another thing that came to mind was uh, the trigger leads places other than what it looks like initially, I think. So I'll describe it from the start. There was a documentary called Midway that came out a few years ago, not sure how many, about albatrosses on Midway Island, I think it was. Uh, and lots of photos of the decayed bodies of albatrosses with a little pile of plastic in the middle because they'd eaten plastic from the ocean thinking it was a fish or something, and then it filled up their digestive tract and they died and bloated and in pain. And there was this phrase in the trailer of it, um, sort of asking, "Do you have the courage to feel deeply enough to look at this?" And that concept of the courage to feel deeply enough, that the idea of that has come up a few times unbidden, which implies there's something to work through there. Um, and it's like I want to feel more, but I
Hmm.
don't know where it is. And I feel
It's
like
hard. It's hard to know what society has desensitized you to.
mm,
It would be great if one could be born a philosopher at maturity to see all things as they are and not as we are conditioned to see them. I think plastics is a good example.
mm,
Well, my mother springs to me as an example, but think of your average person on the issue of recycling.
yeah,
Say they're all for it, they're all pro. Like my mother used to make a comment at me about our generation feeling so entitled they didn't need to recycle. And that irritated me so greatly. One, because her generation indebted ours to a ridiculous degree and did most of the destroying of the planet that she bitches about. And two, recycling isn't really a thing anyway.
mm,
You're just buying the lies of the plastic company in the first place. And I think that ties back to your example, though not your point, of the albatross dying from plastic. And many people will point to that and go, look at that, how bad humanity is. Whereas from my perception, it's not humanity that's the problem in that instance. It's individual humans manipulating the populace with lies in order to make profit, much with most of the catastrophes that have just plagued our species. Convincing the average person that they're right by doing the wrong thing.
mm,
And I bring that up because of my point before. We are so conditioned to believe the things we believe that being open and receptive and able to feel deeply is all well and good. But you need to shed your social conditioning in order to actually experience the phenomenon as what it is.
the
To feel
phenomenon of
deeply. I think what you're getting at with the feel deeply is to look at the effect of actions and come to your own conclusions about the problems caused by them or the problems that cause them, rather than accept the stories that we all accept as cultural people. Does that make sense?
I think so, but there's as you'll appreciate, it is not a area of logical inquiry, so it's a bit cloudy. But the I've got a phrase bouncing around my head of "I want to feel,"
Mm.
and I remember when I was
You want to feel what's real.
yeah, but also just feel that like full stop. The when I was oh after leaving my ex and going to a counselor because I was pretty sure that I needed it. I recall talking about almost wanting. Okay, just going from the words that are popping up in my head now instead of trying to remember what I said then. Wanting to feel pain because it's better to feel pain than nothing. And
Mm.
like it's to not feel is to not live. And I feel like, am I too scared to live?
I don't think that's a you problem. I mean, specifically,
Hmm.
like obviously it is, but I think that you're sort of nailing something that is more of a general problem of our world, which is that as modern, wealthy humans with our technological advances, we're doing everything we possibly can to avoid all things that are human.
Oh, the become better by amputating a part of yourself mentality.
Yeah, cold, heat, tiredness, discomfort, sore hands, hard work, everything that is a feeling. These are all feelings that are deep within us. I'm too cold, I'm too hot, I have to go too far. It's difficult, or my heart hurts because of this thing that happened, or I mourn for this person, or I'm angry at this part of the world. All of these feelings are things that are shunned within our culture. Things to get rid of, things to get around. Or in the case of social expressions of emotion, things that are embarrassing.
They're not
Not
tamed.
You're not allowed to be angry in the street. You're not allowed to be sad or cry. You have to be proper and a logical being and not make others uncomfortable.
Is logical better? Question worth asking.
To think that to think that the logical and emotional parts of your brain are separate and not both focused at the same goal is to remove one half of the whole. They're not one versus the other or one or the other. Emotion informs logic, and logic helps solve emotional problems. We are beings aimed evolutionarily at the same goal.
Removing one hobbles the other.
Yeah, well, these things were evolved in tandem,
Hmm.
together, not separate, not distinct, not one module added to another.
Hmm.
They work
Logic,
together.
yeah, logic not in the formal sense, but in the sense of being able to think things out calmly and
Yeah.
work out
Well,
scenarios and plan a solution.
logic not informed by emotion is psychopath,
Hmm.
sociopath. It's Machiavellian. It's and what is a goal without emotion?
Hmm.
What is it informed by? What is the without emotion? There's no desire. Logic cannot aim at something. It's a problem solver.
Hence nihilism. It's solving with no
It,
problem.
yeah, it can't decide what's good. And logic without a connection to the unconscious, of which emotion is the mediator, is it's lost. It has no guide. It's floating around, slacking and hashing and slacking at everything it comes across. It's not helpful.
Either that or the emotional guide is clothed in apparently logical dress, but it's
Well,
still.
when a culture disdains emotion, but emotion is a part of your soul, it must dress itself up in whichever way is appealed to by your content,
Hmm.
which I think is where the heavy psychologization of everything comes from. I have to explain my feelings. I have to explain them and encapsulate them within logic in order to feel them without feeling guilty. even though guilty is an emotion. But I'm not going to pay attention to that.
Hmm. Or shame, which is more of a recognition of social boundary crossing.
I don't. I'm not sure I'd agree with that statement actually.
Hmm.
Uh, Shame is a guilt for your own faults.
But
I
if
don't
you
think
if
it
you
necessarily needs to be to do with anyone else.
doing something on your own doesn't necessarily trigger feelings of shame. It's like shame and embarrassment are ways of signaling you recognize your
I
fault.
100% have felt shame and embarrassment on my own, with no
Hmm.
one witnessing anything I did. It's the shame and embarrassment from your own eyes
Hmm.
because you're not completely unified, single directed being. Parts of you can do things that other parts of you are ashamed of.
Hmm. So it's still a recognition of one self aspect that an action was wrong according to some metric, whether that metric is external or internal, or an
This
internalized
worries
external
me.
one.
This worries me. Part of my being is telling me that a return of suffering to the Western world might be a good thing.
There is a logical case for that, but an emotional scream.
Yeah, that's my reaction too. And being that I'm halfway through an 8-volume series about the fall of the Roman Empire, the analogy is it's hard not to be pressed between the Germans and the Romans. Possessed of opulence and luxury, weakness and sin manifest. If you're disconnected from the horrors and the feeling of this world, you'll chase feeling in every way you can, which is leads to nothing but debauchery.
Oh,
We are
yeah,
separated from the hard reality, cold, suffering, pain, the death of loved ones, the failing of your goals,
yeah.
the
Pe
loss of friends and family. And here we are, food beyond our imagining, riches beyond our imagining, refrigeration, sewage lines, electricity, everything. And we can't do anything but obsess about anything that could make us as outraged in emotion as possible. He said a thing I don't like. Rage. Because that's a feeling. Whereas our culture seems to be aiming us at, well, this is the secular problem as always, a world of scientists who don't feel anything and think only with logic because that's all that matters and emotion doesn't because we're not stupid religious people. And with secularism, we always descend into murder and anarchy.
the that
Nature cannot be overcome.
you made me think of something I read sometime. Was it, if you ask someone who's surviving in a wild environment, say a hunter-gatherer tribe, if you ask someone there what the meaning of their life is, they're like, I don't know. I'm gonna go hunt to eat because I'm hungry and I want to eat. It's like the need to eat and continue to live makes philosophical wondering about the meaning of life irrelevant.
This is the freedom versus security, right?
Hmm.
We aim our entire culture and our entire civilization on the elimination of suffering. And we eliminate in the process everything that's human.
And by doing so, when you're fighting to live, if you're not fighting to live, You die.
Think about the people who do incredibly dangerous things. Those who are addicted to adrenaline, they do combat sports, or they jump out of planes or whatever. What's the thing they always say?
You feel alive. It makes
I've
you feel
never felt
alive.
more alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing makes you feel more alive than when you're free, fighting for your life an inch from death. Our spirit is to overcome, to triumph against unassailable odds, not to sit in our couch comfortable as anything, drinking sweet tea and grumbling about what someone said on Twitter.
But at the same time, we have a drive to achieve safety from the. Hang on, it's
Not
like
achieve safety.
two opposing forces in balance, and we fight the chaos of the world to bring it's
We're
order and
victims of
tyranny.
our own success. It is. It is. No one is more free than the barbarian living in the forest hunting deer. He serves no one, but he is certainly not secure.
And
The
even
question is, how much suffering do we want? Because the answer isn't none. Seeking total security and the lack of suffering makes us nothing but emasculated, castrated children. Humanity doesn't want that. We want adventure. We want struggle, triumph, grief, loss. We want these things.
that was
Nothing
something
makes
that
you value life more than death.
there was something in that wanting loss and pain and emotion, and it's like that's yeah, I'd rather hurt than feel nothing. It's that's a deep thing in my psyche, and like, as with all such things, I can't really pin it down, but it's a little bit scary.
We want to be connected to the world. And the world is what it is. Reality is cold or too hot. It's windy or rainy or snowy or the pain after losing someone you love. It's not an air conditioned box sealed off from the world. Peterson makes the line all the time about not being able to eat cake all day and busy yourself with the continuation of the species. It's not what we're made for.
This is
We have gone beyond. We've become so successful at solving problems that we have gone beyond the problems of nature, and now we are stuck in our own wealth and opulence, believing that more wealth and opulence is the answer to our feeling problem.
this is why the
And it's
you'll
not.
own nothing and be happy will never work and can never work because what was the quote? The first
Well,
thing humanity would do in a utopia is tear it down to have something to do.
you know what? Maybe this is the fact that I'm drinking, but that statement rings a lot more true to me right now than the idea of where we are.
What do you
The
mean?
man living in a forest owns nothing. He has no security, he has no phone, he has no electricity, he has his bow, and he has his family, and he has his hut. As far as we're concerned, he owns nothing, but sure as shit he is happy.
And try taking that from him and see what he does. Try offering him all that we think is so valuable and see what he does.
Well, there's a reason why the Romans never conquered the Germans.
The the Gauls and the Huns and the Vandals.
Mm-hmm. They're filthy barbarians.
No, the Gauls were the French.
Yes, they
Yeah,
were. Germans were German.
yeah. The Vandals. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Germans were they were basically Viking.
Mm.
They did not they did not want to construct anything. They wanted no leader, they wanted no laws. They lived on the freedom end of the freedom and safety scale. And I think we are far too to the safety side. And it's hard for me to say that because, I fear for my life and I fear for the life of my wife and children if we release on the safety side. But at the same time, I know full well that the further you go towards the safety side of culture, the more deadly things get. So there isn't safety there. It's the promise of it. Perhaps the Wild West style where you may die at any moment is actually the style where the least amount of death happens, as scary as it may seem.
I've heard it in different contexts, but it's like dying every day. Um, yeah. Do you die once? Do you die every day? Take your pick. You don't get to not die. And there's people who live toward the freedom end of the scale, as you describe it, more in contact with the living world around us. And I mean that term very, but specifically and broadly, but it's broad enough for the, yeah. Um, I've been reading a series of articles that's been coming out recently about the different perspective of what the world looks like to people in different cultural environments, and it's describing the enchantment of the world and how the disenchantment of the world has taken place through the age of reason of our civilization. He's been pointing out that in ancient Rome, when they had their age of reason, um, the everyday physical boring reality was viewed the same way as we view ours to a large degree. And of course, they had a different set of gods, but lots of people just started ignoring them and so on, much like these days. But then after the fall of Rome, you had the Middle Ages, and you had books written then where the acts of certain saints, such as slaying a dragon or this miraculous event or other, were taken as literal truth. And oh, was it St. Francis? I think it was writing about having a good relationship with the sun, as in the star in the sky sun, where the sun itself was an everyday experience perceived as a person, as was the sky, as was the land we stand on, and the birds we meet. Persons of different kind, but persons nonetheless, and some level of voluntary action assigned to them, and a mind behind the actions, and that is the very often the lived experience, not just the theorized structure, but the I see it every day, what the hell are you talking about? It doesn't exist type lived experience that people who are not separated from the world we live in and the way we are today experience every day, where we live in a world that came out of human minds and hands. A road is straight or has a calculated corner, and there is a structure of rules that we live within. The trees are planted and placed and pruned and cut down when they stop following the rules because they got too old or disrupted a footpath too much or something. The world is tamed, but when the world is wild and you live in that world, you see it as alive and not just alive as in breathing, but alive as in thinking and feeling. And it's an interesting hypothesis to say, okay, what happens if you do relate to the world like that? Does it change how the world acts back to you? And then that's getting into theology and philosophy and such, but I think that hypothesis is worth entertaining because with humans at least, they had a study where they told a teacher, oh, you're going to teach this class of gifted children when they're perfectly average, or underachievers when they're perfectly average. And the teacher then goes into the classroom thinking that, and then the children who the teacher was told were gifted do better, and the children who the teacher was told were underachievers do worse, just because of the perceptions of the teacher, even if the children were never told. And in the same way, the world's if it would make sense that if there is more to the world than the raw mechanistic reality that we in modern Western society think is all there is, then if you treat it as one big unthinking machine, then it would probably ignore you. But if you take the hypothesis that there's more to it, then you enter the realm of the everyday experience of many people, which where you feel the world. You don't just, yeah, then you feel. That's the
Hmm.
hmm. This isn't fully sketched out in
Interesting.
my head, but it's there's a thing there. There's a something. There's a
This is
feel.
fascinating. Things, moments like this always remind me my metaphysical beliefs. That, hmm,
Remind you of your
that there's something
metaphysical.
else. There's something else going on here before, besides random chance, synchronicities, perhaps.
Yep, the world does tend to do that
It's
when you start paying
interesting that
attention.
it's interesting that we ended up here at the question of suffering because it ties perfectly into the end of sex thing that I keep mentioning. I don't know if I've been mentioning that on air, on recording,
I
whatever.
think we talked about it last time. Should we? Let's segue into that then. Let's see where the segue takes us in it.
Okay. Um, don't let me forget, suffering or not.
Okay, I'm not sure
But
what the
I've
meaning
been
behind that
thinking,
is, but suffering or not.
okay, good. Don't let me forget that. I've been thinking a lot about the alien issue recently. I watched some documentaries with my wife. I wanted to expose her to the subject and it sort of rocked her world a little bit. Less so the alien part of it, although that has, but more so the deep black parts of what was once governments become private organizations that are steering the course of our planet,
I'd like to
leaving that aside.
just
What?
one thing when you use the word alien, because we've discussed this before, I think I know what you mean by that, but I'd like to make sure that we're not now. I
Not us.
well, not us, but also not assumed to be physical beings from another planet, not assumed to some unknown, not us intelligent beings that are encountered. And that
Okay,
is
if you
a
want me to be specific,
mm,
um, beings, they do have a physical form, but they are, or seem to be, integrally linked with a higher dimension of some form. Whether they
mm,
came from there or have the ability to travel within there seems irrelevant.
yeah, from another
But there is
planet,
a higher being.
from
Yeah,
another
there's a higher
plane,
form of
from
consciousness.
another dimension, irrelevant, but
Yes,
it's like encountered, not human
yes,
beings.
yes. Not human beings, but there is a higher dimension element linked in that is not able to be separated from. This is not just some being that's from another star system that showed up and like, yo, what's going on here? There's something to do with consciousness and higher reality that's linked in.
Because if it was just a purely physical ship coming in
Yeah.
without that sort of link, then you'd probably see it on radar coming in, and you'd point
So
to so on. Yeah.
here's the thing. They've been showing up for a very long time.
Yes. As far back as history goes.
And they've always been peaceful. If you run the thought experiment in your head, if there are multiple civilizations out there beyond the stars, possessed of technologies that are infinitely beyond our comprehension, that allow them to travel through time, space, and dimensions, it would also simultaneously allow them the technology to destroy everything. We have the technology to destroy the Earth now, here, bounded and limited as we are. Imagine what they have. As far as I'm concerned, for interplanetary or intergalactic species of multiple species to exist, it is necessity for them to be peaceful. Would you agree with that statement?
As in, if
Maybe I should just continue.
in the same way that there are multiple civilizations, multiple groups on our planet capable of traversing the planet, capable of destroying the planet, and they're mostly peaceful enough to not destroy said planet.
No, I don't think that's a good analogy because
Hmm?
we're children and we've had this power for like 70 years.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll leave that aside. It is my contention that in order for many civilizations to exist on a universal or galactic scale, potentially interdimensional or I'll leave that part aside. For thousands and thousands of years with the same level of technology, I believe that they must by necessity be peaceful, else they would not exist, being more than one of them. If that is the case, I see violence as an evolutionary adaptation in order to protect and or acquire a mate and reproduce. And I don't think those things can be separated. And in my mind of late, I am coming to the conclusion that a world without violence is not one that can be achieved without the elimination of reproduction. That violence is as integral to our being as a strategy to acquire resources, which is fundamentally a strategy to require reproduction, mates. I don't think that you can rid a species of violence without ridding a species of sex and the need for procreation. And I wonder, as to the transhumanism thing that is popping up all over the place and all this gender bendy stuff, I wonder if that's something to do with it. And what this is leading me to is the question that we asked earlier. Do we want to be a species without suffering? Because I can see, in order for us to go up, to join the other species in being a higher form of life, to be able to explore this universe and potentially others. Limitless, boundless, with no scarcity, as is the secularist dream. I can see the sacrifice being all of that which we hold most dear. Which would be competition, sex, reproduction, status. I don't think that you could keep those things and be a peaceful species. And I think that there's 3 choices. I think the 3 choices are to lose our technology and our might in numbers and go back to being a borderline animal, a barbarian, if you like. To drink and laugh and curse and fuck and be a human being in touch with reality. Pain, cold, suffering, death, but life and laugh and joy and food and all the pains and pleasures of an animal that can experience their own life. Or to abandon all things human, to meld with technology, to reproduce through artificial wombs, to use gene editing to eliminate all that which makes us human. The instinct to acquire resources, the instinct to compete or outcompete others, the instinct for violence and gratification, all things that drive us towards reproduction evolutionarily. Because that would make us peaceful. Because then what will we have to compete for? And in the moment, which is the third choice, which is really not what we want, we're stuck in the middle. We have all of the technology and all of the power. We can destroy ourselves many times over, and we are now beginning to be a threat to those off the planet. We've acquired several of their technologies through accidents of history and now targeted acts of violence. We are rapidly attempting to enslave the majority of the species under a single centralized power that has these technologies that the public does not know about. And we are actively becoming a violent threat to the other species in existence. And if you play that scenario out, they have no choice but to cleanse us, of which I would not blame them. So here we are at the crossroads. We are quarantined, effectively. We are fighting all of these battles amongst ourselves. And I think, to a large part, we are trying to decide whether we want to be human or not. Because to be human is to be animal. And I don't think the animal survives beyond the nest of the planet it's born on.
So, a few things come to mind. Um, Going in a few different directions. So let me lay them out and then let's explore them.
Alright, I'll sit back.
I think your point stands true. Your point that by losing contact with the animal side of ourselves, we lose the drive necessary to continue the species in the literal procreation sense and the nihilistic motivation to do lack of motivation to do anything sense. Um, Also, the whatever nature of being those that are encountered as aliens at the moment are, if we take their existence and some connection to a higher plane, higher dimensional, higher level of existence, would there not also be those above them and above them and above them and above them who would also act in their own way to maintain the balance of the whole? And then the last one is the idea that to become peaceful as humans would mean to lose the touch with the animal side. I Now this one's a bit nebulous, but and links to a few things that I've read but not fully understood or not fully internalized, however you phrase it. That similar to allowing um, extra dimensional aliens as part of the discussion, if we allow reincarnation as part of the discussion, then that would make sense as those who have gained sufficient experience over multiple goes round at this stage of life to integrate it, master it, however to phrase it, could then move on to whatever's next as beings ready to learn that next stage. And that could be moving towards that peaceful state that you were describing, because an entirely different state of being might not require that same animal aggression to continue, but at the same time, an understanding of it and a sort of integration of the self may well be needed to get to that stage. So at the moment, it's necessary for us to learn the lessons of it, but then becomes unnecessary later. That's very sort of hypothetical, I guess. But yeah, so come back to the first one. The Your point that we as individuals and as a society disintegrate without contact with our animal nature, which is aggressive and violent and painful and has these aspects that we're trying to amputate from ourselves. The Tower of Babel, very much so.
Mm.
Yeah.
What's your point with that? Sorry.
I think that point, I think that as self-destructive as we appear to be being at the moment, I have my doubts that we would pose a threat to any beyond our level, though I would not be surprised if such technology was acquired and manufactured, if it suddenly vanished out of wherever it was stored, or just stopped working when an attempt to use it in anger was made.
I don't disagree with that sentiment. Um, but I think an active attempt to make such technology that would be dangerous to them is enough of a threat for them. Whether or not I don't think we'd be literally capable of using it, but
I don't think
the threat's
that
enough.
it would lead to the destruction of the planet, but I do suspect
The
that.
people,
Sorry?
the people.
Destruction of people on the planet? I suspect that if such an event were to occur, the ones in the firing line would be the ones with their finger on the trigger.
That would be nice,
But their
but I
logic
would
is not.
rather at that.
Yeah, their logic may not be our logic.
It's it it is very tempting to comfort with the "it would not be me judged" answer.
Hmm.
But how could they not judge us on a species-wide level? But we've known that these people have been in charge for a long time. Public knowledge is able for any citizen to find. I would imagine that if I was in their shoes, I would contain the threat for as long as possible and watch and see if the average person did anything about it. If you were going to judge a species based on their merit or lack thereof, okay, evil people have taken the reins, they're in control of ridiculous technologies that is threatening the universe itself. Are you going to do anything about it? Or are you going to go, oh, that's bad, let me eat more cake?
I guess just as there are records of
Hmm.
encounters with this type of creature, some of whom I think do appear malicious. I don't think they're all peaceful by our definition. I think there is far more diversity there.
Is that from historical examples or more recent ones?
Both.
I'm not aware of the historical ones. I'd be
They
curious
went
about
by
those.
different names then, because the
They
word,
didn't go by different names.
well,
We named them different.
yes, we named them differently then. So, like, what encounters with non human creatures of malicious intent are recorded in history. Um, Many, and they are dismissed as fairy tales in today's high and mighty age of reason.
Perhaps it is my own ideological or metaphysical belief, but I truly do not believe them to be hostile.
I do not believe hostility to be the dominant force. I believe hostility to be existent. But I also would
I
point
would find that
to.
comforting.
Hmm,
I would find it legitimately comforting because it would invalidate my fear about life in the next stage requiring the elimination of hostility and violence.
hmm.
I think that it would nullify my point. It would nullify my argument, and it would make me
Hmm.
far more comfortable. But I would
Well,
note that my current ideology, current self-formed ideology that does not allow for that possibility, which
hmm.
is interesting. Perhaps that's just simply from my own argument before of when every individual existing person or being has the ability to destroy all life, period. Violence cannot continue to exist at the same time as life indefinitely. Therefore, in order for
But
life to exist,
that
violence must
does
be eliminated.
that does assume that there are no others who would intervene or who actively continue to prevent such actions. And to use the word
Mm,
aliens are not the only
okay.
non-physical intelligences that
Those
people encounter.
those that those that would intervene themselves would have to be free of the violence.
Or at least do so with the passive consent of others.
Whichever level is the level that intervenes must also be free of the violence, else they themselves would do the act.
Yes. But many levels
Right.
can intervene. So
It's
violence
more
can
like a checks
exist.
and balances thing.
It's like the individuals allowed to intervene on any scale would be those with uh, a majority support, if that makes sense, as in, or those on higher
Mm,
on the scale would interact to prevent that.
I think my brain still comes back to the only way to prevent a single rogue actor from destroying existence with such advanced levels of technology would be the elimination of the instinct in the first place.
I'm not saying
And on
that's
the
not a
time scales
components
and
factor.
scale that we're talking about, I see that as the only possibility.
So where does encounters with beings higher on the scale by humans fit in the system you're in the thought system, world understanding that you are
Are
laying out?
you saying higher than the ETs as we class them?
Yes, I'm thinking basically gods.
Spiritual.
Yes,
Yeah.
and layers between them because people continue to encounter said things which are dismissed as psychotic episodes imagined and so on in rational language, but continue to happen nonetheless. And we can't understand them almost by definition, but we can see the patterns in their actions, and that,
Okay. If you're wanting me to lay out my map,
mm,
metaphysically, I see multiple levels of planes, both above and beneath.
yep,
And my analogy of above and beneath is based on morality. Those that are above are what we considered gods or deities. And as you move up the hierarchy, there are less and less, perhaps to the one, and the morality of them increases. Higher beings, higher spiritual beings. I'm sure we get the analogy. But I also believe that there are those that are beneath that do have evil intent and try on the daily to reach into our world.
hmm.
And this is where the demons, the ghosts, the poltergeist, all of this mythology comes in.
Demons, yes, ghosts, I think, are a different category, and possibly a blurred category where multiple things have been mixed together, depending on who's talking.
Yes, both higher and lower. My
Hmm.
point with that is that I believe human beings to be above these things. We, okay.
Or able to be above.
Yes, I believe that we are in the middle on purpose. That we
Hmm.
are the beings that are capable of both divine good and divine evil. Divine evil, God, that's such a weird statement, but you know what I mean.
Archetypical good and archetypical evil?
Yeah, that we are the beings that have the ability to choose.
Hmm.
Like, regardless of the structure of the universe, and when you were making your point earlier about the reincarnation issue, the only reason I object with that is that clearly whatever the hell is going on here is entirely revolving around choice. And the reincarnation issue kind of eliminates that possibility in my mind.
There are versions of that I have heard that do include an element of choice, where the self that we are in totality is greater than that we are conscious of now, and that self then chooses to be here at this time for the growth that can occur. So
Mm,
so that would include a choice to be here.
right. What I see, okay, the role I see ETs playing in the metaphysical map, since we've walked into that by some odd connection, um, I see ETs being species that have been in our predicament, which is that of being tested, and progressed into that of being the tester or the container of the test. In that, if you were going to build a literal hierarchy of spirituality, that we would be in the middle. Whatever people class as demons or devils would be beneath us, reaching up, trying to drag us down. Whatever people would class as higher beings or gods would be above us. I want to say reaching down because that doesn't feel right, but observing.
No,
And
I
that,
think reaching down to draw us up, those who reach up in turn.
um, I would say that there is a level of beings that are doing that, but I
Hmm.
hesitate to say that because I don't think that they reach down nearly as much as the demons reach up, attempting to drag down.
Yes, yes. I think it's sort of every demon
Um,
trying to drag you down for themselves,
right.
where those from
I think
above reach down to those who choose to reach up if the time is
yes,
right.
yes, they are there observing, and they will occasionally intervene, but they more want us to aspire upwards
Hmm.
than them pull us up, because why else test? I see the ETs as the beings in between us and them, that those that are in this physical realm somewhat mixed between us and the higher realms, and that are acting as a physical restraint on us
Hmm.
until we pass or not pass the test. While those who the I see them as the filter.
Hmm.
When the secularists talk about the great filter, that's what I see the ETs as. And when it comes to the reincarnation issue, I believe that you can be reincarnated in any of these places. I do not believe. I don't think I've ever said this to myself. I do believe in reincarnation. I do not believe it is bounded or limited by time, space, or species.
Hmm.
However, I do believe it is limited to conscious species. I don't believe in the reincarnated as a bug to get squished because these squished bugs kind of crap that the Buddhist pull.
I would agree with that. I would agree with some of that. I would say that
Mm.
reincarnation would be limited to similar levels of consciousness. So you don't get reincarnated as a bug because you squished bugs, but
Mm.
at the same time, being reincarnated as a wildebeest would be possible. And
Yeah,
the.
no, I don't believe that actually.
Mm,
Um, Seeing as I'm laying out my map, I might as well
yep, yep.
lay it out properly. Um, I believe that we are the most important creatures in reality because we are the ones being tested, the ones with the choice. I believe that the beings that are higher than us are just that, higher, more virtuous, more spiritual, better. But I believe that they are almost less important because they do not have the decision resting upon their shoulders.
Hmm.
ETs or angels or otherwise, whatever scale you want to go up, they don't have the choice between good and evil. They've already made it, which makes them out of the game, which makes them higher than us, but also irrelevant because now their role is to serve as guides, protectors, and prison guards. It's funny how it cannot help but come back to the religious
Hmm.
choice between good and evil.
I feel like I want to lay out my equivalent map because we've talked about that many times, but the
Well, I laid out mine,
yeah.
um,
So
albeit in low resolution,
yeah, I'll
because
aim for a
I feel
similar
like you should
level.
do the same.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll aim for similar resolution because otherwise I can ramble on for far too long. Um,
Well, we're still in the backstory phase of this project, so there's no point in going crazy in depth.
yeah. So before I do, in your map, where do the human souls come from before they are human? Are they created in that state or what?
Hmm. It's funny. I've been a spiritual person for most of my life, but I've spent almost my entire life avoiding giving specific answers because I like to maintain the I don't know thing. But if I'm pushed, I would
Hmm.
say my inclination is to say that our souls are eternal, that there is no beginning nor an end.
Hmm.
The idea of where we came from brings me to the if there is no beginning, if there is no end, if we are not bound by time, place, species, or scale, I do believe that we are all one being playing many hands in a great play.
Hmm.
The universe experiencing itself, God playing with limitations, however you want to say it.
There are
I am
ways.
me,
Hmm.
separate from all others. But at a grander scale, I am not, as I believe there is only one consciousness.
Hmm.
But I also believe it's infinitely fragmented at many different scales, and they're all infinitely or integrally connected. But because of the infinite nature of it all, no one part will experience the whole and itself at the same time. It will experience both the whole and itself at some time, but it is also infinite. So it is both now and never.
Hmm.
Infinite is beyond our ability to comprehend. But
Hmm.
that is as close as I can get to it.
It sounds very similar to physicists saying the laws of physics stop applying in a black hole. Like that's where the rules we know break down. So they're beyond
Yeah, I
their.
believe that I
Hmm.
will be myself, the higher version of myself that is not bounded by this one life forever, infinitely. But I also believe that I am both my higher self and whatever higher self is beyond that, and the one beyond that, and the one beyond that, simultaneously, and that I experience it all simultaneously. But I, being the fraction of a fraction of a fraction, only experience the fraction that I am currently inhabiting.
Hmm.
My higher self is experiencing itself currently, and I am also that, but I do not experience that while I am here. And perhaps there are moments in time when I experience the higher version, and then the higher version, and then the higher version, and perhaps even the one version, but not in any given moment.
Hmm.
It's hard for the finite mind to play with the infinite.
Yeah. This helps me understand a lot where some of our disagreements come from, because I think this is getting to the root of some of them. So,
Hmm.
so
Let's see, play
my
with that.
my structure, to start with us and move out from there, um, we as individuals here have existence beyond the purely physical, in the sense that every language on Earth except modern Western English has a language for chi, life energy, life force. The force in Star Wars is based on the from Japanese martial arts. It's like the that concept is essentially universal except for this language. That implies there is a thing
Um,
there.
no, we call it spirit
Spirit
in
comes
our
from
language.
Latin, yep. I've seen it called
Yeah,
Nuifre,
so does
etheric
English.
energy. Yeah, true.
Yeah, English comes from Latin.
Modern English, the accepted modern scientific
Spirit,
English.
soul.
Yeah,
Yeah.
soul is different. Soul is different. No, yeah, spirit is used to refer to a different level in modern English. But yeah, so there's
Apologies.
that level and a different layer of the world there that we can dimly perceive. And like you walk into a room, you feel the vibe of it. You meet a new person, they give you a chill. It's like that's the sort of sensation through that level, or the level above, which is the level where imagination and emotion take place. And there is consciousness that seats within the physical body, but it's more of a reflexive nature and a processing nature within the neural net of our brains, and then that acts as a sort of receiver for the next layers up, which all sort of anchor to each other strongly, except in death when the separation occurs, and then you get out of body experiences where people are dead for a little while and then perceive things from their out of body experience that they could not have perceived from where their body was, even if their eyes were open, and so on. It's like there's evidence. This isn't just a hypothetical structure, it's like here are supporting points. Um, and then I agree with the existence of demons in the sense of malicious entities reaching up from below.
I think it's worth throwing in
Mm,
on that topic for any of you who are like concerned about that. Um, they are less powerful than you,
mm,
than us.
yeah. If you
If
say
you're not,
no,
if you know, if yeah, exactly. If you're
yeah.
okay, I'd also like to, if you're the kind of person who's going, oh, it's bullshit. I'm not, I kind of don't care. I'm not going to explain it to you. But for those of you who are willing to accept what we say on trust or faith or whatever, they are there. Their only way into this world to hurt you is through you letting them in.
Which can take the form of a bunch of atheists getting together and laughing about how little they believe in all that mumbo jumbo, and laughingly calling on some demons to give them all the things they ever wanted in the world, and then
Yeah,
promising their soul in return. It's like, believe me or not, but please don't try that. It goes bad places.
yeah, yeah. Or the ghost or demon issue where people go in and like inspect haunted houses as atheists and go, "Oh, I'm not afraid of it. Come and get me," kind of crap. It doesn't go well for them. Now, you are a higher being. We all are. And these horrible, evil creatures exist, but they are beneath you. And you can banish them if you choose. And more importantly, you could not let them in.
Hmm.
I just feel that's worth throwing in there. I imagine, particularly from the origin of this show, people who have listened to, you know, discovered us later on and then gone back and listened to the archive and started from episode 1, they're going, oh, it's, they're talking about subconscious and, they're philosophizing and talking about psychology and trying to deal with their issues, and they hit this. I go,
Yeah.
what the fuck? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then, of course, out of body experiences then are a good link on to, okay, what's a ghost? Well, according to what those who can see far more than I, and so I take what they say as an argument from authority because I have no better source,
Mm.
that the process of death, first you separate from your physical body, and then after a while you separate from the next layer up energy body, and what's left is you inhabiting uh, the body of imagination. Stuff can go wrong in that process. Strong senses of unfinished business, like I have to hang on for this, or something else can cause issues in you staying on in one form or another, and that's what would correctly be termed ghosts. Many forms of
Okay.
ghosts are encountered, things that just replays of a emotive event in a particular environment, a battle, say, where people
Mm.
died, or a
Yeah,
um,
trauma seeping into objects or environments
yeah, and
and being like an echo.
you often have a house with that where a murder occurred and a terrible relationship happened, repeating the same event. So people who go to that place then are affected by the residual impact on that house
It's
and
funny. Sorry, I always think
mm,
it's funny how often atheists get scared in places like that.
because it's challenging that it's showing them things that shouldn't exist.
Yeah, because they walk straight in and their whole being is like, "Oh no, get the fuck out of here." They're sitting there going, "Why?" But they're scared anyway.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway, sorry. I just
yeah.
always find that hilarious.
And one of the key things in this layout to me is that these different layers contain more than we see from the physical, so they are inhabited and possibly more densely than we would think by many who are utterly indifferent to us, wish to be helpful, or even malicious. But
Mm.
at the same time, we are not powerless against them. We we are strong where we are, if that makes sense. We can't go to them and order them around. Yeah, I'll just
We
leave
can
that at
defend
that.
ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. I think things are defensively biased. So if you, yeah, it's much easier to defend than to attack.
Mm.
So all the layers are inhabited, and aliens, as we've been calling them, or whatever they were called in past centuries when they were encountered, spirits, fae, whatever. They're how far back do you want to go, and how many cultures do you want to look at to try and find names for them? And whatever they called them at the time, there were things that were encountered and continue to be encountered, live on those
Hmm.
levels, and
Are,
then
are you
hmm,
moving towards they're not really physical beings phenomenon?
they can make a presence. They can have a physical body, but they do not have to.
Yeah, I actually disagree with you on that.
Mm,
I see the legitimate spirits and higher spirits as something separate to them.
mm,
I see them as their own thing, as quite literally another species that is in the in-between stage while they still have a physical form, but have
mm,
the ability to travel between the dimensions where physical forms are not required anymore.
mm. Well, there is another version that I've heard, and this is my whole
I should let you
structure.
lay out your position. Sorry.
Well, it's worth pointing out the little things like that because that made me think of another aspect of it. This isn't, this is what I think. It's, here are a bunch of things that all make sense
Mm,
together that I've heard that are my
right.
cobbled
Because
together
I saw
explanatory
where you were
structure.
going with that.
Mm,
I saw where you were going with that, and I agree with the description of beings that you were going towards.
mm,
But I see those beings as separate from the beings, the ET style beings that we have interactions with now. I see them as two separate phenomena.
mm. I have
That's
all,
why I wanted to make that distinction.
yeah, I have also heard claims that ours is not the only uh, version of our level, if that makes sense. That there are parallel physical planes that we can't get to, and a highly evolved species on one of those could fit the bill that you're describing. And this then gets into the many explanations. How long do you want to argue about it phase, where it's just like a thing
Mhm.
happened. That's what all we can say.
Yeah, let's not get into the multiverse side of things.
Yeah, yeah.
I agree, though, but that would be a very long conversation,
Hmm.
and I don't want to be for the listener. For the listener who's like, "Where the fuck did this come from? This isn't the show I signed up for."
Yeah.
Um, I'm not interested in proving anything to you. That's not what I do here, and I don't think that's what Michael wants to do either. That's not what we do. I'm not interested in convincing you of anything. I'm not going to show you proofs. I'm not going to give you arguments or documents. You can go find that yourself. All right? Believe what you want to believe. We're here to talk about what we think and what we know or believe, depending on your confidence or trust, about the world. So we're going to talk about these things. And we're going to do it in a way where we don't make apologies for it, or don't try and back it up with proof. Because it's not my job to convince you. It's not your job to disprove me either. You can trust us.
And saying that there are
Or you could do
ways,
your own research,
yeah,
or you could already believe us and just be interested in hearing another opinion, which is, I think, what's happening between the two of us, where we both have similar views, say different perspectives on the same thing. Anyway, I felt it necessary to say that. I
yeah,
apologize for keep interrupting you.
yeah.
Um,
No, it's all right.
yeah.
I do the same to you. Um,
Well, I'm drinking
yeah.
tonight, so
If
that might be
someone,
something towards it.
yeah, if someone
I don't
wants
think I mentioned
to,
that yet.
sorry.
Mm, sorry, go.
If someone wants to prove or disprove it, um, yeah, go do your own research with a open but skeptical mind. Like anything I've found or encountered personally, I've always been aware of this is what I encountered, this is what I experienced, I wonder what that was, or this is what I read, that's interesting, I'll think about it. It's all let it sit for a while and let let things play themselves out and see what happens, then draw a tentative conclusion and go forward with that, and then draw another tentative conclusion.
Mm. I
But
think it's worth noting on that topic, out of the two of us, you are definitely the more skeptical person. So when listening to our commentary, that's worth noting.
yeah, oh, we are such opposites in so many ways that work well together.
I Okay, you are definitely the more skeptical person, but I would also say that I've probably had more first-hand experience than you. So
Yeah.
perhaps that might counterbalance the listener who's like, oh well, I won't listen to him now. It's like, I've seen enough with my own eyes
Hmm.
to make some of the claims that I make. Anyway, I'll shut up. Please
Yep. Yep.
lay out your map.
You drink your
I'm
drink.
sorry.
Um. Yeah.
Yeah, that won't
So,
make it better.
we'll then drink slowly. So within the structure as I understand it, there are those on higher levels reaching down in the same way that you described to help us up. Um, if we reach up to them. And they are they come in many forms under many names, helpful spirits, angels, gods, um, of which I think Jesus is one, and I've encountered him, and there'll be those who think that no, that wasn't the real one, that was a demon, and it's like, well, how the hell do you know? Are you so high and mighty to be able to describe the nature of the universe that you claim your God created? Yeah, yeah, rant. But um,
Also worth noting that he said specifically that he was no greater than any of the rest of us.
mm. Anyway, yeah, so I've encountered a few gods, and so that is where the confidence in that view comes from. Now, onto the nature of the soul in my understanding of it. Now, this is where I think some of our disagreements are founded. You talked about humanity being the ones under test. Now, I certainly agree that this area is sort of like the kindergarten that's guarded by, quote, parents, and that we're not let out to wreak havoc elsewhere, and we're guided where necessary, but also left to learn our own lessons and make our own mistakes to a large degree. But I think that the fragments of, I'll use the phrase soul of the universe, that, like you talked about the eternal oneness, to paraphrase. I agree with that, and the fragments separating off from that to learn and grow. And I agree that we have an element of timeless eternal existence, but I think that is uh, not where we exist. That's a thread connecting us to the higher. That's not our existence, in my personal view. So you can't say it's wrong because you're not me. Um, but that fragment of soul of the universe that breaks off starts out as mere existence, and the version that I read, which I have adopted because it makes sense, would say that those start off in the mineral realm of pure existence, no life beyond that, and then that gemstones are the highest level of that, and then you go through most of the tree of life, through single-celled animals, through insects, through plants, through mammals, and so on, each learning and growing in the same way a newborn learns by instinct and reflex, and over long periods of time, that growth accumulates to the point where you're able to handle emotion, and then you get very obviously emotional animals like dogs who mourn the loss of their human partner. Um, and the animal phase is spent mastering that element of existence. The plant phase is spent mastering the energy body phase. And then you get to human, where we have self awareness now. We've got the emotion stage essentially mastered, and we're starting to work on the shell of the next phase, the first outlines of the abstract thought phase, which is the mental level that's above the emotion astral level. And so that it's not that we were created or eternal or anything like that, ready to be humans. That's the result of a long process of growth. And there may well be parallel paths that don't go through the human phase. Dolphins and whales, as intelligent mammals, come to mind. But the within this structure, we cycle around being human a bunch of times while we're mastering the basics of the mental level and growing an aspect of ourselves there. And then once we've finished what we need to master about being human and about that the mental level, then we go on to whatever's next. And one of the ideas that I've heard proposed, which frankly no more than that, how can you prove it, is that we have an enormous number of humans alive right now, which are far more than we've ever had on the planet, and we've also got far fewer megafauna, where I think megafauna is anything over 50 kgs, which is relatively small, but far fewer bison and buffalo and all sorts. So, a reasonable hypothesis is that they've reincarnated into humans. Hypothesis. I don't really know how you'd go about proving that, but a lot of herd animals being suddenly human would be consistent with herd-like behavior in a lot of humanity at the moment. Um, yeah, can't really go any further on that point, but the one of the key things about this view of the world is that humans are very much not the most important. That there are many, many spirits of equal or greater intelligence who are directly concerned with this world. There are many stories of a nymph or dryad. Nymph is a spirit of a spring or river, I think, and dryad is a spirit of a tree who had individuals who ended up serving them as their priest, and they only had jurisdiction over a very small area. And people would encounter, communicate with, and form relationships with these beings. And I've got a book on the way. What is it? World of Many Gods, something like that. I forget the title right now, but it's on the way, and I'm looking forward to reading it because it lays out a lot of the theology of this. It's like the first exploration of polytheist theology in 1,500 years or something. So it'll be interesting to read it. But
Okay.
yeah, we're not the most important by
No, see that
a large
you've lost me
stretch.
there
Yep.
because I was following you. I agreed with an asterisk to almost all of it. And then you made the statement of we're not the most important. That just didn't seem to connect with anything else you said.
Mm. So which class of students in a school are the most important? Is it the preschoolers or
Well,
the ones who are about to
is it
graduate?
is it no, in your analogy, it's the teacher or the student. You made this description of you made this description of a progression of reincarnation and consciousness
Hmm.
and learning upon untold centuries.
Hmm.
And then you described us as effectively the pinnacle of that. And
Hmm.
then you made the statement of we're not the most important without referencing something else that was above us. And then you made the statement of what were effectively guiding spirits in many levels and forms. And I don't see how that connects because in my mind, the guiding spirit is not more important than the one that the spirit is guiding.
The guiding spirits aren't
Okay.
guiding us. The levels, quote, below us in the evolution of the soul also need guiding. And according to the
Yes,
law that I've read, L O
but to where
L A
we
R
are.
E, or to parallel tracks. Although, yeah, I think
But ours is the problem track, right? Those that go to the parallel tracks, such as dolphins, like your example, don't exactly need much guiding.
possibly our role is we play a larger role, just like um, the higher grades in high school play a larger role because they have mastered more of the basics and so have more have the ability to take on wider responsibilities and the chance to screw up in a wider way.
Hmm.
So more
There's something about
responsibility
that
and
analogy
importance.
that doesn't land. Like I can see how that analogy is natural for the situation you're describing, but there's something about it that's not right in my
Hmm.
mind. The high school analogy, I mean.
Okay.
You described an endless progression,
Conveyor belt like.
mastering the different levels. Yeah, going up and up and up and up and up. Would not the spirit that is progressing through those levels, regardless of stage, that spirit, the one that is being developed, be the most important?
There are many spirits at many stages of development. There are spirits that are
Yes.
currently at mammal stage or insect stage that will reach our stage and beyond in the future as we are transitioning through this stage to whatever's next once we master this one.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think this is
No, okay.
where
I see what you're getting at
I
there.
I think this is where a lot of my value structure comes from, and I do
Right.
value
I
the
can.
chance for constructive thought and
No,
criticism directed at it.
I can see how your hesitance to what human centric thinking stems from this. And I'm not saying you're wrong, by the way. I'm trying to integrate what you've said.
Hmm.
Um, okay. Given what you've said, I don't think that I would change my statements that we are the most important, but I would alter it to say that our development. No, actually, no, I wouldn't. No, we are still the most important because we are at the stage where we affect everything else. So it doesn't matter how right those at the mammal stage get it, assuming your theory is correct, if we fuck everything.
Yes.
It if we're gonna do the high school analogy, which I think works if you change it to be a Montessori style high school,
Older
where
students
the
teaching younger.
yes,
Hmm.
where the older students are effectively becoming teachers and it cascades down the hierarchy. And we are the older students. And we have not got our shit together, effectively.
Yeah, so we are the most important as in we have the greatest impact.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
The younger ones are
But not
the
most
younger
important
ones
in the
are
sense of
important spiritually in the all things being equal sense.
mm,
But if we don't get it right, it doesn't matter how right they get it.
yes,
So it's
yes.
sort of secondary. But like we are the biggest problem,
I think the
which makes us
area
the most important.
mm,
Perhaps that's why humanity is the way it is. We want to be the most important. We want to be loved, so we became the biggest problem, so that they have to pay attention to us. Sorry, I just thought that was funny.
because
Well, I can see a child doing that in this analogy, and I've known
mm,
children who do that.
mm,
So
yeah,
yes, it's funny, but there's probably a hint of truth to that.
yeah. The what is it? The bit that gives me yeah, while we may be the most important in the sense that we have the largest impact, a high schooler stealing the lunch of a preschooler so that he can have a tastier meal is still not right. And
Agreed.
that's the perception that I apply to our destruction of the natural world, that there is
Mm,
far more awareness and consciousness and value there than we are aware of within our Western worldview, our Western materialist
yeah.
worldview, and that is where my Well, that's an interesting word to come to mind. Anger and rage at the pain inflicted on that living community
Mm.
comes from.
I think there is a big divide in humanity about prioritizing the pain inflicted on humans versus the pain inflicted on everything else.
Mm.
And I think that is a large part of the left-right divide at the moment. I think it's interesting you brought this up because you might have a good chuckle at this because it's about as far removed from my character as you can imagine. I had this discussion with my wife the other day that the ET issue, I think, which is effectively this issue we're discussing, is kind of making me questioning my eating of meat.
Oh, yes.
For that reason of like, okay, we're gonna be peaceful, uh, because from their perspective, we're more like the cow than we are, like them. Maybe not, but I look at the cows that I work with some days, and I'm like, there's some consciousness there. I can see it,
Hmm.
but I've still got some bits of cow on a plate right in front of me.
Yeah.
Um, and it's hard for me to square that in my mind with that these bits of what is a somewhat conscious creature that I have had, interactions with on the plate in front of me are also still the best food source known to man. Um, in terms of our, biological health, which is really a really hard square to circle.
So, what does it mean to kill an animal and eat it then? Does it
I don't
mean
know.
within the how I make sense of it, within the structure I laid out, is that killing an animal is not the end of that being. It is the end of the physical creature in that form, but it is not the end of that existence. And that the wolf is not evil for eating because it must eat meat to survive. We are not evil for taking life because it is part of the rules of our existence. Just as we
Mm,
talked about going against our nature in a cultural sense, for many people, not eating meat would be going against their nature in a physical sense. There are many people who will be far more happy and far healthier on a intelligent vegetarian diet. But from what I've heard, there are quite a few people in the vegan community who will go a few miles out of town so they won't be seen or recognized and eat some big hamburgers with some nice meat because their
yeah,
cravings get so strong. Like,
I'm 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 doing my best not to debate you on the for some people the vegetarian is the best option thing. But I think that's my personal ideology. I'm trying to.
yeah, I'm caveating. It's also plausible that it's not the best for them either, but I'm just putting that in the I don't know, so I'll just caveat it basket.
Fair. Well,
So,
you are more kind and agreeable than me.
and if people want to live a certain way, then go live that
Oh, I'm all
way.
for that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do your thing, bro.
But if someone
Don't rant
is,
at me about it.
yeah, if someone is debating the morality themselves, my argument would be if you want to compare it, but to not eat meat is not the the moral argument for it from a metaphysical standpoint is not strong. Animals are necessary for the health of the ecosystem that we inhabit. And the fact
Mm.
that ecosystem involves fences and pasture and milking sheds and so on does not mean that it is not a system. Manure is necessary for the cycle of the nutrients. You can compost, yes, but that
Yeah. I think
animals
it's
are
also
part
worth
of it.
noting. I think it's also worth noting that industrial level agriculture, when it comes to you know plants and vegetables and stuff, is far more destructive than stock is,
Hmm.
like by a massive scale. The amount of death per kg of food for carrots is a lot higher than beef, and it's a lot more destructive to the natural environment because it requires more space.
The biggest argument for that point that I know of is compare a tractor driving through a field 50 years ago, look up videos of it, and a tractor driving through most modern agricultural fields today, and there are many anecdotes of this. The tractor from 50 years ago will have a flock of birds coming into land just behind it to look for grubs and worms in the soil. So there is life there. The tractor today, no birds. There might be the odd one, but essentially the soil's dead. It's hydroponics
Well,
in dust,
there's
not
also
soil.
the combine harvester issue, which is
Mm,
just like the amount of decapitated bunnies from that thing chewing up grain is not, you know, not cruelty free. It's not death free.
mm.
A lot of animals get just ripped to shreds in the tilling and re-sowing of soil and the harvesting of crops. Whereas on your other example of like beef, sheep, that kind of stuff, um, they just run through the paddock and they shit everywhere, and that you know manure makes more life.
Mm.
And every now and then, a bird gets stepped on or whatever, but it's not anywhere near the same level.
Of course, the manure can be in excess and cause harm, and any system can become toxic. But animals themselves are
Yeah.
not, and eating animals is not.
Okay. Yes, but I would say that on the large part, that is a good thing.
Having
Yeah.
animals in a system is a good thing.
Yeah, that's what regenerative farming is almost always is like just having animals on the thing so they should everywhere.
Yeah.
Because, it turns out that that makes more life.
What is the secret of life? Poo!
Yeah, and decaying animals. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Bigger life makes smaller. Smaller life makes bigger.
yeah, and
Black Kumbaya stuff we should have learnt when watching Lion King. Sort of forgot.
yeah, the cycle goes on, and participating in that cycle of life doesn't isn't bad. It's how you participate that is important. It's like, do you raise an animal with cruelty and then
Mm.
slaughter it painfully to then waste half of its body?
Yeah.
It's like that's
Yeah, I mean
bad.
that's a big thing because I've spoken before, I work in the dairy industry. So I deal with on a regular basis 500 to 700 cows a day.
Mm.
And you can be mean to them. They're they're pretty powerless against you. Or you can not. And that's really up to you. How nice their day is depends on you. And there are some not nice things that are part of the business, but they're few and far between. And most of the time they have a pretty good life. And we do our best to do that because a stressed and hurt and, you know, cow having a bad life makes less milk. It's actually against business interest to be mean to them. We treat them nice, we make sure they're always fed and happy, we give them shelter, we make them happy because otherwise they don't produce the milk that we need to run the business.
And if you want to read about a positive farmer animal system where the animals are eaten as meat, look up Joel Salatin. He's a character.
Hmm,
Books such
sounds
as
interesting.
Everything I Want to Do is Illegal.
Oh, you gotta send me a link to that. He sounds like my guy.
And
Oh,
The Sheer Ecstasy of Being a Lunatic Farmer, that's on my shelf here somewhere.
I'm gonna do my best not to say words that would get me cancelled. I like the sound of him.
Yeah, so his father bought the family farm in America when, due to the farming practices of the day, like post Dust Bowl, I think, um, the soil had been eroded to bedrock in places. You couldn't put in a fence because you dig a hole and then there is just stone. You can't dig a hole in stone. So they used tires filled with concrete with a hole in it so they could stand up the fences. And that farm has been brought back to fertility, to the degree where the farm machinery salesman who was going around selling a mower to all the neighboring farms had the machine jam and break on his farm because the growth was so thick.
I need that
And
on a t-shirt.
yeah, so they were. He describes letting the animals out into a new field every day, so they spend a short period in each field. So he'll open the gate and the cows and pigs will, oh, they go through in sequence, I think. I can't remember what the sequence is, but they rush with joy into the new pasture and start munching on the fresh grass and sort of jumping and happy. And they stay there during that day, trample down the grass, and then by the time the gates open, they're like, oh, yay, fresh grass again. And then they go through every day and they trample the grass, they churn it up a little bit by walking all over it, they manure it, and then the grass recovers. And the grass gets plenty of time to soak up those nutrients, grow strong again. Um, Chickens come through and scratch the bugs that are living in the manure, sort of just happily scratching in the dirt and eating bugs like happy chickens. The pigs come through, yada yada yada, and these animals are happy and healthy from eating what they evolved to eat, and then they have one bad day in their life where they some strange new things happen, and then it all goes black, and then whatever they go to next happens to them, and their body is eaten by happy humans who are happy to have such delicious meat.
I think it's also worth noting that the description you're having of animals being moved around all the time and always being happy and going to the fresh grass like every day, that is the entire dairy farming industry. That's our standard practice.
Hmm.
Every single day they have fresh new grass, they run in, all happy, eat it all, trample whatever's left, poo all over it, and then go to the next one and it regrows. So if you're concerned about the topsoil thing, I don't think dairy's the issue there. I think it's more um, wheat and corn and stuff like that. Because we turn the soil all the time too. A certain amount gets turned into fresh grass, and you can see it when the tractor goes through. It's like a good meter of soil just being like ripped up, flipped over, sowed with new crops. And if we had the bedrock problem, you wouldn't be seeing that shit.
Hmm. There's a debate about ploughing versus no dig agriculture, but that's a debate for another day. You are having results.
Mm.
Your soil is fertile and staying
Yeah,
fertile. That is
part
the
of that is
best
also
argument.
government requirements, so you can't exactly blame us for that.
Ah, yes.
So, back to the statement of everything I want to do is illegal. That's a majority of the farming too. We know what's best, but the government doesn't, and they tell us what to do. And of course, all farmers listen to that.
Yes, yes. What farmer
Yes,
would think of
yes, of
breaking the
course.
law?
No, of course not. We listen to our good liberal leaders who have definitely had time on the farm.
Uh, yeah,
That's
so
interesting. It's also
hmm,
worth noting that a lot of farmers do farm meat for their employees. So, like the meat that I referenced that is on the plate in front of me has been spent the last 2 years on our farm in a paddock down the bottom, plenty of grass, water, no trouble in my life. I drove past them once a week and saw them, and they sort of looked at me like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And back off. They're just sort of moseying around, a few friends chilling, and then one day they got walked all the way up to the shed, what's going on, and then, pop, pop, pop. They didn't know anything other than a nice cruisy life, and now they're on my plate. No stress, no worries. Most humans would wish for such a thing.
Yeah, it's not that they are imprisoned, it's an implicit deal. We protect you and raise you and feed you, and then we'll eat you. And frankly, it's a much better life than any wild animal would have, where they're always scared of predators and running. And then when they do die because they got a bit old or got lame or hurt somehow, it's by being literally eaten alive, or at least very painfully
Yeah.
murdered by a wolf or something. It's like, that doesn't sound like a happy
Yeah.
life.
There's also a statement of, how can one feel imprisoned without the desire for freedom?
True, true. It's like
And we don't understand their desire state. But also the other part of my brain's thinking about the conversation we had earlier versus, freedom versus security.
yeah. How many wild animals will die if if you keep them in captivity, as imprisonment of wild animals is called?
Yeah,
Yeah.
some creatures, some species just can't do that, but some you can. And, you know, it seems that cattle are very much the kind of creatures that are just like they're the most cruisy things ever. For people who haven't been around on the farm, they'll just sort of stand there and poo and look at you. You can go up and scratch their heads if you're nice to them. They'll trust you in the scratch. You go around them each year when they're calving and having kids, having babies. You go and see them, they're just lying down at night, and they'll just look at you. They won't even get up. Oh, bird life, you know. They got big, thick hides. They're warm.
Mm.
They got a lot less to worry about than we do.
Yeah. They're experiencing the security end of the spectrum in their stage in reincarnation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
I worry about where we are. The issue of sex is really on my mind a lot.
what
And
outcome
I
do you
don't,
fear?
the one where we don't choose a path, the one where we allow the worst of our species to wrestle the greatest of power and act hostile. No, there's so much I don't knows with this one. I fear them all equally, but for different reasons. And I feel like it's very different parts of me that's afraid of each one. And even all that issue set aside, we have ridiculous problems with sex as it is. The issue of those that present themselves as what? The billionaire bachelors with all the women in the world, and they're happy as can be
I was going to say all the women, but
in
no love.
no trust.
Yeah.
One couldn't help but be alone. They have no companionship with anyone of the opposite sex because they can't trust any of them. and I have trust issues myself, so it's not like I'm exactly exempt from that. But to have no form of relationship or genuine companionship with the opposite sex, to have them be nothing but a disposable pleasure.
Oh, that gives me
I can't
shivers.
imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine that being anything but horribly scarring. And it's always the same people who do nothing but drown themselves in substances and proclaim that that's the greatest thing ever. My life is great. I do nothing but drive fancy cars, have sex with multiple women. They always like to make a point that it's other people's women, as if that makes them feel better than other people, because I think that they feel horrible. And I'm not actually sure I believe them. And then, although there'll be a selection pressure there, obviously. Um, and then and they're just like always drinking and always smoking and always doing drugs and like, oh, my life's great. And they always sing about how great their life is. And maybe that's because that's what we buy, but
It's not a great life.
I think it's a great life for a sociopath.
True, true.
But while parts of me would love that, other parts of me would feel untold amounts of pain from being unloved and desired only for success. For no one to be able to understand, no female to be able to understand or appreciate me for my being, only for the game I play, the mask. Because that's all they see them as is. They see them as nothing but masks who have convinced themselves that the mask is who they really are.
There was
And
something.
it's also hard because, you know, it's very easy to make the claim that, oh, I'm just explaining away their circumstances and unhappy to make myself feel better for me not being in their position or me being jealous of them.
No, no, there was a
Like I get that argument.
there was a therapist a couples relationship therapist who I watched on YouTube who he was describing how some people who he'd counseled who were pickup artists, so they could sleep with a different woman every night and they had honed that skill and they were hollow. They were in so much pain because of what you described that they had the mask and they could get the mask as much love as they wanted, but they couldn't get any love for themselves and they
Mm.
were miserable.
And that's why I was very careful in our conversation about becoming more masculine with you.
Mm.
And I made the point of like I know how to do that. And I'm not saying I practice it. I have practiced it, but not to the point of completion. Um, I have only ever been with my wife, and I will never be with anyone else. But and there's very good reasons for that. We can go into another day. But it's something you want to be careful of because in trying to develop the confidence in which attracts the attention, and then you can bare your soul to the other person and be loved for who you are. It's very easy to fall into the trap of only using the display part that will get you access, but only temporarily. And the other part for me is like, okay, I have sex with a different woman every night. Why? You have kids with none of them. Like, what's the point? You got no companionship. You got no children. You might as well be having sex with a sex doll every night. And like, okay, yeah, they're real, cool, but why?
Yeah.
Because the momentary pleasure always feels good, Like, I haven't had the experience of having sex with supermodels every single night, but I can tell you from my experience with food, alcohol, and illicit substances, it doesn't matter how often you do the thing that makes you feel very good. Right afterwards, when the effects wane, you feel really bad because momentary pleasure gives you no meaning. Doesn't matter how good the momentary pleasure is. You feel hollow afterwards, like you described with the pickup artist.
Yeah, what you mentioned about bearing your soul or being able to bear your soul to someone, that made me think of, how do I describe it? Sort of, okay, to take the filter, take the intellectual filter off. It's like that's what I want. I want to be able to bear my soul to someone and connect to them on every level in an interplay of two people getting to know each other. I want to hand my bruised heart to someone, knowing that they will care for it as the most precious thing in their life, so that I can take their heart in my hands and guard it with all my strength.
Hmm. Okay. Some comments on that. One, obviously, you don't know that they will do that. Two, you need the presentation part of you to catch their eye in the first place in order to be able to bear your soul, which is where the difficulty lies. You can't only be the honest and genuine person. You have to be somewhat flashy to catch the attention. Otherwise, you're just another boring nerd in the background.
Yeah,
Um,
working on it slowly.
that's not a comment on you, by the way. That's just in general.
Oh,
I think it's worth making a note of how my wife and I got together. Um, I played game and I displayed myself in a public way, and she came to me. And I played games some more until we were at dinner. And when we were at dinner, I grilled her about everything she believed about everything because I didn't want to spend time with anyone stupid, which she was, to be entirely honest. But the answers to my questions suggested that she has the potential or possibility of being open minded about things she disagreed with. And when pushed to create or come up with answers to questions she's never heard before on the spot, she used good logic to come up with correct and good answers to questions that society would be upset at her for, which is part of the reason I picked her. Anyway, I continued to play game for a while after that point because these things were all um okay. How do I say this? The game that I played was conscious. The slip ups where I exposed myself were unconscious in courting her. Play game for a while. Some things I won't mention. Um, was up late at night, and she was at home, and I was in my hammock. Um, I was living in a forest at the time. Technically homeless, I guess. Hmm. Interesting story. Anyway, it was a great life. And I was sending her songs. Songs that I was calculating would evoke particular reactions. More game. I later found I towards the end of it when I was getting very tired and sort of delirious, I sent a song that was not game. But something that meant a lot to me and was very clearly not an attempt to display something, but it was actually me bearing my soul. Again, subconscious and accident. And she later on told me that that was one of the reasons that she fell in love with me. She was attracted by the part of me I portrayed. The game, the mask, yes, but also part of me, not false. because you have to have it integrated for it to work properly. If it's just pretense and mask, it falls flat. Um, Confidence only works if you can back it up. And later on, there was another instance of something similar. More game, more pretense, more play. He had a moment of admitting vulnerability, and I reacted with care, compassion, and attempting to help. And that was the other thing that she told me later on that sealed the deal. You need to have integrated the parts that are both dangerous and attractive and bad, but also manifest the parts that are, well, the good, the true, and the beautiful. Kind, loving, vulnerable. Because the song was one that would honestly generate ridicule and laughter out of most people, particularly the kind of broy bros. And my attempt to help her was nothing but genuine. And those who wear the mask and play game will always laugh and always ridicule those who do genuine actions of kindness, which tells you how miserable they are.
I'd be curious as to your thoughts on a self-assessment of mine
Mm.
that um, it feels like you, um, the mask was relatively speaking easier for you. At least that's the impression I am getting. While the uh, vulnerability was more difficult, and I suspect I'm the other way around. That I'm the phrase "wear my heart on my sleeve" comes to mind, but I'm not sure. I don't have a good enough handle on what that phrase means to say if it's applicable. But
Um,
yeah,
I see where you're going,
then I'm
but I
working on
think I
developing the other aspect, the attract aspect, rather than the
okay, I agree with
yeah.
that statement more. I was going to say I disagree with your framing there.
Mm,
Both parts that I displayed to her were parts of me,
mm,
not a pretense, but different parts, opposites almost. I don't see you as someone who displays all of one. Mm. You don't need a mask. You need to genuinely develop that other part.
yeah, that's a better way of
I,
phrasing it.
yeah, I had the ability for game, mask, whatever you want to call it, because of the experiences of my life. And I would also, on your comment of difficulty, say that neither was more difficult than the other. I was merely making the point that I was intending to show one part and not the other, and I failed at that.
Mm,
Um, which is ideal. I think legitimately that's what women want to see. For you, you have your genuine soul unobscured, which is good. But there's a part of your being that is underdeveloped, like an arm that's not grown properly.
mm.
It's off putting that it's not there. It's not that the part of you that you display is not liked by women. It is, but it's the part of you that's missing that is the objection.
Mm.
It's not a rejection of the part of your soul you're bearing, because I think that part of your soul is accepted by women, but it's not enough.
Because I've never had trouble talking to women as friends, if that makes sense, as
Yeah,
meeting
they like
someone.
you but not attracted to you.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that's not a rejection. I think that's really important to remember. Is that the uh, okay? Don't take offense to this language, but this is how it maps in my mind. The
yeah,
boy part of you is not rejected. It's not that she doesn't love the boy part of you, but she needs to want to fuck the man part of you too. It's got to be both.
yeah.
It can't just be the fuck boy, and it can't just be the cute and lovable child. You got to be both.
So the the way you talked about grilling your at that time wife to be on that first
Mm.
date, that strikes me as in line with your personality in the sense of highly disagreeable and
Yeah, it wasn't intentional. I can tell you that much.
okay, okay,
But it
that
was most certainly my advice for men if they ever ask me is do that.
mm. um the scenario, the equivalent scenario that I've come to in my head, grilling would certainly be the wrong term, but it would more be fearlessly stating things as I think this, what do you think? And I disagree with that, just politely, of course, as well, I'm sure you can see that.
Mm.
But that's the bit that's my best guess at what that part of me would look like developed. The ability to say, no, I disagree with that, and to listen to the reply, but then say, no, I still think that's wrong. Not to not roll over.
Mm. I can see that you would be more polite in your interactions, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. To be clear, I think that what you're describing, I don't think that's any less going to be any less successful than what I did. I think it's worth noting that you shouldn't feel like that's the lesser. I think the real key is when you're in that situation and you're having that conversation and you're asking your questions, um, because that's the point of a date. Are you compatible? Are we going to have problems? Ask questions. You need to not only manifest, but genuinely not feel. Mm, yeah. You need to not be afraid of her responses or reactions to anything you say.
Hmm,
You are there to judge her, not to try and impress or appease or manipulate her into liking you. You are there to judge her.
this links into something else that I'd been thinking about. That um, the I heard that some men find an angry woman very attractive, and this has been displayed in a bunch of movies. Like a woman gets very angry at a man and throws something at him and walks off in a huff, and he's left behind going, "Whoa, I want her." And the idea being that her anger is adorable because she is harmless to you. And previously, I haven't inhabited the strength of mine necessary to be in the position of strength to be able to look upon the anger of another as anything other than danger. And that was certainly the case with my ex, in the sense of my feeling towards that anger. And I wonder
Oh,
if,
you never enjoyed the rage. You never enjoyed upsetting someone else.
no, no, it's danger.
Ah, no, you need that for a first date. Because you're testing to see if she's the type of person who's going to go, that's offensive. You don't say that. For some reason, teenage years spring to my mind. In those days, and I think this is why I was successful. In those days, even the girls that I was attracted to or had history with, I would relentlessly mock. Because when they got upset about it, I found it funny.
Hmm.
And I actually still do this with my wife. I will tease the shit out of her, and she'll feign being upset. She's somewhat, but she also likes it
I feel like there's an
because
element
it's that same indication. Hmm?
I feel like there's an element of like showing your strong side to this where you can show her that you'll be gentle and kind all you like, but she needs to know that you've got some steel in your spine, that you'll stand up a bit. And if you stand up to her, then I wonder if that's the equivalent of the attraction to a strong or an angry woman that I talked about for men, that he said no.
Well,
He disagreed with
okay.
me. He didn't just
Think about it
fawn
this
over
way.
me.
Think
Mm,
about it this way, right? Evolutionarily, woman wants a man to protect her.
mm,
Provide, yes, but protect foremost. If a man, if you're a woman and a man is afraid of you, how could you possibly be attracted to that?
mm.
Legitimately. How could that be nothing but something to be mocked, ridiculed, and punished?
Yeah,
Like, just in pure honesty.
something to select out of the gene pool as soon as possible.
Yeah, through ridicule and punishment. Break down his character, break down his ego so that he never tries to, or never is able to convince any woman of reproductive success again.
Mm.
I hope that doesn't strike too close to home with your partner, ex. Um,
No, I didn't
I
get any
say
of
that
that.
because
It's
I went.
it's it's
Okay,
constructive.
well, I went through something similar, but I can see how that would work.
Mm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, because I've been playing around with um oh,
You have to care what she thinks, but you can't be afraid of her. You have to value her input, but you can't submit to it.
mm.
Women like to push and test men.
There's a guy who oh one of these people who speaks to rooms full of couples and has his own take on the interactions of male and female, of course, and he's thought a lot about it and has his own takes. But David Dida, I think, as with so many thinkers, he's right for people in a certain stage or in the stage that suits his.
Hmm.
He's right for
It's a
people who are
niche.
asking the question to which he has the answer.
Yeah.
And he talked about how the feminine or woman would test their man. They would get upset or poke him or something to just the analogy that came to mind is that it's just like a child being a bit naughty to push the boundaries to check they're still there. It's like, I'm going to poke you and check that you'll be tough when you respond. And so if you can show that you've got some strength, it's like, no, I'm not going to drive you to the supermarket at 10 o'clock at night just because they're about to close. We will be fine. We can get food at the next opportunity that works, but I'm not going to be ordered around. I am taking your needs into account, but you're a big girl, and I'm not going to be pushed around by you. Yeah, so that scenario, I've been playing around with it in my head of can I say no? In the same way I do to my son. It's like, can I say no to a woman who wants to know that I've got a spine? And so
Mm.
she's testing me.
My greatest advice, always, and has been for a very long time, to any man who has any issue with any woman is what she wants and what she says she wants are not the same thing. And she's not going to tell you the answer. She knows what the answer is, but she's not going to tell you. Your job is to figure it out yourself and make the right decision because she doesn't want to have to lead you.
I
And
think,
that's really annoying because men want everything to be easy.
mm,
And the answer is she's never going to make it easy because it's not meant to be. She doesn't want a man who can only get by when it's easy.
I'm just thinking of a couple of different sources in relation to that concept of her not saying what she wants. Um, one male, one female, actually. One Jordan Peterson, and the other a woman on YouTube who goes under the channel name of the Dadvocate, and she's funny. But what was it? Basically, there's the way I've distilled it out in my mind is there's two patterns of interaction, and this is probably wrong. This is the current draft, so anyone who wants to complain about it being wrong, yes, it is. Go away. Um, there's two modes of interaction. One's the emotional, and one's the rational. And in women, the emotional is dominant. You could probably split it up into right brain, left brain, whichever way around that goes. But it has its strengths. But decisive action is not that strength. That's the male strength. That yeah. And in to try and ask a woman in that state to tell you what she wants would not work. And I feel like the response pattern that I'm building for that at the moment is some level of stoic. I will do my best, but I will get it wrong, and you can't. No, that. Yeah, under construction, but a sort of. I'm not going to be pushed around. I will do my best, but I'm not going to be pushed around by you getting upset.
You're trying to formulate boundaries because of your history.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I can understand that difficulty, and I'm personally, or not am, but more have than am, personally been struggling with that for a while.
Mm,
Um, because of my history and the similarity to yours.
mm. But then I think that it is possible for a woman to recognize the difference between those two states, the rational and emotional state. And you, I think it's possible to have a conversation with her in the rational state where you say, I'm not going to get this right the way you prefer it to be unless we have a conversation about it and work out a compromise. And then you
Hmm.
can work that out with her when she's calm. So when she's upset, give her a hug, even if the one she's angry at is you. And that was that woman, the advocate's advice, actually. Even when she's angry at you, give her a hug and sort of make her feel safe. And
Um,
depend on the woman and the guy in this whole scenario, but
I would say as a point there, sometimes you have to push her
mm,
until she cries. And then, because the anger is often a defense.
mm,
Don't touch this, it hurts. Go away. And you try and hug someone in that state, they're gonna, you know,
yeah,
smack you.
yeah, that makes sense. I think I'm
Um,
I'm repurposing the parenting strategies to relationship and treating
yeah.
a female partner
I just
like
think it's
a
worth
5-year-old having a
men
tantrum.
to know. Sometimes when she's angry at you explicitly, um, you need to push the button that you know is going to make her break. And when she breaks and cries, you can go over to her then and give her a hug and go, it's okay. Because the second that an angry person cries, the anger was a mask and a shield protecting the vulnerable part that wanted to cry. Once the crying comes out, whatever they were angry at you about, they're not actually angry at you about that. They're angry at something else, or they're upset or hurt most often about something else. Then you can go in and help.
And this isn't pushing the
Obviously, not
button
universal.
because you want them to cry. It's pushing the button in the same way you tell a child no.
Yeah, it's not cowering to the threat. That's what it is. Because
Okay.
when you're, if you have a partner, if you're married, and she's angry at you, being explicitly angry at you, it's a threat. That's what it is. And if you bow to that, then you're falling prey to the same problem that we had before. She doesn't want you to bow to it. She doesn't want you to accept the thing that she says is true when you know it's not. She wants you to stand firm and weather the storm, even when the storm is her. And if you do bow to it, she'll never respect you. And she certainly will not want to sleep with you anymore. You have to push back. You have to weather the storm until the storm of her anger breaks on you and becomes her pain or vulnerability or whatever it is. And then you come in and help. And at that point, she knows. She's understood why she was upset. And she's not mad at you anymore anyway.
I'm wondering if similar to how to put it, when I'm trying to find the right words to describe this concept. So something I've heard said by female relationship YouTube speakers is a wish to be able to be soft, like not have to be hard and strong, but because you have to be strong to endure the world, but to be able to be protected and sheltered so that they can become soft and gentle and feminine. And I'm wondering if this is linked to that in a sense that she wants someone who, oh, hang on a minute, who's stronger than she is. So when she's
Yeah,
angry, he won't break.
yeah, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, that came out simpler than I thought.
Well,
Yeah.
this is the truth.
So it's not that she is now. No, it is that she's angry. She is
And she wants
experiencing
to feel
anger.
safe to rage.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
I wish it wasn't this way, but it is. And she should feel safe to vent her anger and frustration at you.
It just makes me think of how Nigel later talked about dealing with angry teenagers.
Well, who else can she vent her frustration and anger at?
Yeah,
And
not
she certainly
wrong.
shouldn't do it at her kids.
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
she's not
true.
going to be punching the wall. She's, a woman.
Yeah, so she vents her anger at frustration at her partner because he's safe to vent that anger that has to come out somewhere. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
he
is
should
safe
be
to
safe.
vent it
Yeah,
at, or should be safe to
yeah,
vent it at. Yeah, he will probably vent his physically somewhere,
yeah,
but he has different strategies.
yeah. He will also return it because it's a frustrating experience, but in physical form, obviously. This isn't like her hitting him or him hitting her. This is always, you know, an argument, effectively.
Hmm.
Um, if he doesn't back down, eventually she will cry. And at that moment, all hostility is off. Because what she really wanted was to vent all of her frustration. She's not angry, she's frustrated and upset about whatever's bothering her. And the only way to get the crying to begin, which is the process of healing, is to to beat your hands against the wall, effectively. Unfortunately, you're the wall being in this circumstance, but it's how it is.
Hmm. This makes me
And
think
at
very
that point,
much of how the mutual friends that we met through, how their relationship goes.
okay, yeah, I don't want to go into that too much further. I don't know too much about it, but I have some statements about that, by God. Um, no, I think it's worth also noting that, okay, beats against the rock until she breaks down, and then she's, encompassed and comforted for and cared for and soothed until she feels okay. At which point in the functional relationship, she will then soothe the man because she knows full well what she did, and that obviously that's going to affect him. So, in the functional relationship of this sort, he weathers it, he stands it, he pushes back, he holds his ground until she breaks. He helps her solve the problem, he helps her feel better and make sure she's okay, and then she will return the love. Apologies, care, love, soothe him, and spend some time
Hmm.
comforting him.
So that's the stage when you can get into the rational problem solve. So you deal with the raw emotion, and then
Mm.
after that's spent, then the letdown hits, and then you can deal with the okay, there is this problem. You got angry at me for doing this thing. Let's discuss it and work it out.
When she cries, she knows already.
Hmm.
It's not something you really have to like sit down and think about. By the time she's cried, she knows what she was upset about, and you should too if you're paying attention.
Hmm. But I'm saying that then you can start the negotiation that the two-way
Yeah,
negotiation to fix problems.
yeah. From my experience, at that point, it's known by both parties. It generally just needs to be said aloud,
Hmm.
and then it's a form of like, okay, comfort everyone.
Hmm. Because given my developed, however we phrase it, strong anger control, I don't think I'd. I think the response that I had to that would be the same one I use for my 5-year-old of stand there and it's sort of no, I'm not going to go along with your tantrum. Appropriate words for speaking to an adult, of course, but it's just like the rock in the storm rather than fighting back against the or returning the anger in kind. It's sort of cross arms and close off, I guess. Like, no, I'm not engaging with anger, and you can blow your gale out against me until it's gone, but I'm not going to engage with it.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know if I have the right answer for
Hmm.
that kind of analogy. I think it's worth noting that when I was more insecure and our relationship felt less stable for me, I would just take it and I wouldn't fight for like a long time until things calmed down. And it took a long time and it hurt me a lot more. And now I am far more willing to go after her when things like this happen, and it resolves it a lot faster.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't know how that fits in, but I felt it's worth saying because I'm not afraid of her leaving effectively anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
I'm willing to hurt her feelings
so when you
now.
say hurt her feelings, it's not say hurtful things, I'm guessing. But it's
Um,
say truths that may be hurtful. It's not say insults
yes,
and
yeah,
cruel words.
it's not being malicious or intentionally harmful, to make myself feel better. It's
Hmm.
not being afraid to say the thing that's annoying me, even though I know it's a very harsh criticism of her. Like a rough example is the other day we had a situation that was someone like this, and I compared her to her father, and that broke her instantly. And I'd never compared her to her father like that before because I was always afraid of her, being in a fit of rage and leaving. But at this point, it's like, I'm not afraid of that. So I did that, and she replied with an how dare you, but she couldn't get through the whole statement before breaking down and crying because she knew I was right. And so she couldn't say it. She couldn't say the how dare you statement because she knew that she was, you know, there's only so far that you can push the gambit. Um, God, it's such a complicated business.
Yes, and I will not master it for years to come, I suspect, but I can play these scenarios out with help and hopefully have a slightly better start.
Hmm. I think a good note to end on there
Yeah.
is something I heard today, which is if someone claims that they have this life figured out, it's a very good reason not to listen to them.
Oh, if they had the life figured out, they wouldn't be here.
No one's got it figured out. No one.
Yeah, yeah. No,
That's why we're here. We're here scrambling around, figuring it out. And we're in our 20s, the two of us. We sure as shit haven't got it figured out, and even them in their 60s don't. No one does. We just do our best,
hmm.
and we look and seek advice where we can find it. I don't know if that's why whoever's listening to this is listening to this, but no one's got the answers.
Yeah. I guess the hurtful truths to say in the midst of an argument come to um sort of Jordan Peterson's Tell the Truth. It's like you don't just blurt out hurtful things because you feel like it. You think about it and think, I think this is true. And you might be
Yeah,
wrong, but you
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 have to be willing to hurt someone's feelings.
hmm, you have the pattern of saying what you think is true, even if it might be wrong. And then if it is wrong, they can come back and say, that's wrong because of this. And you can be like, you're right in
Yeah,
that way. It doesn't apply that way, but I still feel like it applies this way.
well, it comes back to the sacred cow thing that we keep talking about.
Mm,
If you're not willing to slaughter the sacred cows, if you're not willing to hurt someone else's feelings, then you can never say anything truly meaningful or impactful.
that's a difficult one for
And at
me.
which point, you might as well not say anything at all. The mark of every true philosopher is to be hated by his peers.
uh,
Well, what's the greatest philosopher of all time, as far as we're concerned, in the West?
Socrates or Plato? Which one was the one that died?
Socrates.
Yeah. Yeah, he didn't
And,
write anything down, only his students did, didn't he? Isn't it?
yeah, yeah. And you could even to a certain extent call Jesus a philosopher who was mythologized. And in
Mm,
the same vein, he was sacrificed or murdered for corrupting the youth. At the same way. To not be hated by the nation means that you're not doing your job, as far as a philosopher is concerned.
mm.
I don't exactly feel like sacrificing myself on the cross, but at the same time, I'm doing this public speaking project and I'm not going to sit here and, you know, avoid certain things. So
Yeah, and
we'll see what happens.
in these conversations, I can say things that because I understand our relationship, we can both say because we both understand the relationship, we can both say things that could have been said maliciously and be hurtful, but because we have the established pattern of I'm saying this because I think it's true, with no intent to hurt, but I will say it
Mm.
if it is true, even if it would hurt. And
There's a good
that's
note actually on our relationship. I hadn't quite thought about that. That there's no sense of harm for one another, or no reason almost.
mm,
Your friend that we met through springs to mind as a good example. Someone who plays the status game and competes for the status game has reason to inflict emotional harm on others. Coming back to our discussion earlier about securing mates being the source of violence.
mm,
But perhaps those in our position, whether that's the Sigma position or whatever else you want to call it, my success does not hamper yours, and your success does not hamper mine.
mm,
Because the point of the Sigma game is to be utterly unique and play your own game. So the success of another is something to be celebrated.
mm.
Camaraderie, not a threat through insecurity.
But at the same time, you falling would not tear me down. So to extend the concept, not that I wish this, but
Mm-mm.
you falling would not tear me down. So I'm willing to poke your weak spots.
Yes,
Because if you can take
and it's
it, then you.
entertaining. Well,
I
things that are
certainly find this entertaining.
entertaining are,
Yeah.
well, yeah, things that are entertaining because there's meaning and value in them.
Mm,
So, in this analogy, to poke the other's weak spots is well, almost to poke the same weak spots within yourself. Now, perhaps you have it more together than the other person, but you get to see their potential reactions, which could be a clue into avoiding an action yourself. It's like the thoughts dying instead of you that played out in the real world,
mm,
and hopefully it helps them along and they get better, and you get
mm.
to watch that process. You can see it played out not just in your imagination, but in the real world, which is even more valuable.
Because this was very much the dynamic that I had at uni with my engineering student colleagues, and I've got
Mm.
that at work too, to greater or lesser degrees possibly. I haven't tried to measure it mentally, but there's definitely that element of I think this is wrong. Really? Why? Tell me about it. And
I just got you.
what?
Perhaps it's the style of person that I am, but I don't exactly encounter many other people that are in our position.
Which position would that be?
Not playing the status game.
Hmm.
I've encountered many people and spent time around many people who are attempting and failing and use that failing to say that they're not playing, but they still are. But there's very few people that I've met that are truly open minded. Some that
Oh,
are, but majority of them are not interested. I'd say that's
yeah,
the distinction. The
yeah,
people that I've met that are of open mind are not interested particularly in ideas.
yeah. So I think you were actively rejected by the status game and then rejected it in turn, and I
Mm.
didn't get it, which led to my exclusion from it. So I thought, well, that's a dumb game.
Yeah, I had to adapt. And in adapting, I feel as though I have transcended it.
Hmm.
So now I feel superior to said game.
Yeah. So that now that transcension of the status game sounds a lot like the, if I get it, correct me, yada yada, you get the idea. Sounds a
Yeah.
lot like the attractive male female dynamic of here's my strength. I'm not trying to show off big muscles. This is my strength. Well, if a woman's attracted to big muscles, then a guy showing off his big muscles will attract her. I'm not a big muscle guy, so I don't want a girl who's attracted to big muscles as her thing. I want a girl who's attracted to my strength. And so if I demonstrate my strength as
Uh,
it is most
Okay.
me. Hmm.
Asterisk on that. All girls are attracted to big muscles. And B, what you want is a girl who is not solely attracted to that.
Hmm.
She will still be attracted to that, and you should still have that in order to assuade that part of her who is attracted to that. But you want a girl who does not have that as the be all and end all.
Hmm. Who recognizes there's
One
more to
who,
muscle, more to strength than muscles.
yeah, yeah. There's a certain type of girl who goes with a starving artist,
Hmm.
and that is one who places value on potential rather than actuality. She's
Yeah.
making a bet, and you want to find that girl. And the interesting thing I found about that girl, it sounds like I have many experiences, but whatever, I'm not going to
That
explain it.
archetype.
Yeah, perhaps. They don't seem to particularly care if you fail, which is interesting.
Hmm.
It's not a I'm going to place a bet that you'll succeed later, and then if you don't succeed later, I'll be upset. Um, as long as you can provide for her, if literally the entire rest of the world never sees your value and only she does, she kind of doesn't care,
Ooh.
which is weird because evolutionarily, obviously, the thing would be that she's placing the bet on future success.
She's placing the bet on the wild card of creative children, which can creativeness gives either wild success or failure, and it's
Mm,
a low probability of massive success. And if she
yeah,
sees that potential, even if it doesn't play out for you, it could play out for your children.
right. It's a gene selection rather than a right. So she's selecting for the potential for yeah, it's selecting for openness rather than conscientiousness. You are someone of complete unique in a way that unique is valuable. And though you may not be able to manifest it, in this instance, your children perhaps will, rather than, oh, you're someone who can work really hard and earn money because you're smart and you can work hard.
Hmm.
That's just opened a door in my head of how evolution selects for the different traits of the big five personalities. Oh,
Hmm.
that's a thought experiment to play with
Yeah, I'll
because
look
I
for.
think we just accidentally ran into selecting for openness and conscientiousness and intelligence. But it makes me wonder, okay, neuroticism, that's a harder one to select.
Think about
Extroversion, introversion.
yeah.
Hmm.
Think about that for another time because we're already over 3 hours.
Yeah. And all this talk about women makes me want to go spend time with my wife.
Yeah, well, the last thought I had, which to be a little self-centered, I think I fit. Well, I hope I find a girl who wants to place that kind of bet on potential success because I think I'd be a good bet. I've got a few things lined up in my favor and a few positive signs.
Well, okay. Make some statements on that. she's not betting on future success. She's being intrinsically attracted to your potential and the parts of you that are unlike anyone else.
Hmm.
So it's not some kind of Machiavellian logical choice. It's a wow, he's fascinating and mysterious is the word that I got from my wife. Mysterious is the description that she used to describe this phenomenon. I think there's something to that. An intrinsic attraction to something in you that is utterly unique and valuable. Whether or not you manifest it is actually irrelevant. You don't have to do anything for her to make her attracted to you. And if anything, that should make you feel more secure. So I think that the language of someone making a bet on you is not the right one.
Hmm.
The woman that is attracted to you is attracted to you. And it's not what you've done or achieved, it's you. And I think that you should remember that. And I think you should also take it in confidence that there is certainly many women out there. You just have to be someone notable enough to be not a background character in their world. Once they notice you, I don't think it's going to be that hard for you to find who you're looking for.
Hmm. I just need to have the strength of presence to be noticed.
Yes, I like that phrase.
Hmm.
You're going to stand out.
And the strength of character to stand up
Mm,
to her and the world.
yeah, they know what they're looking for. And they don't tell us on purpose. Because otherwise we just fake it.
Hmm. That's true.
Because, we're pretty desperate to get it. And they're painfully aware of that.
Yeah.
Oh, poor ladies. So they have to play this. Well, manipulative is true, but it makes it sound wrong. I don't think it is. They have to play this deceptive game. Because in reality, they have to test us. And if we could fake it, then that's really bad for them. So be the one that passes the test, not the one who fakes it and cheats.
I think that's a good note to end on.
And I'm tired.
Yeah. Oh, 3 hours, 17 minutes. Good night.
I wonder if that's a record. I
Yeah.
think it is.
If anyone
Good
gets to the
night,
end,
everybody.
bye.